times. If anybody's watching and want to comment in the chat, go for it. If you're watching this after the fact and want to post comments below and have questions there, throw them in there. I'll try to get to them as fast as I can. Alright. I've been using Macs for the last 9 years, I think. Something like that. So I've used it once or twice. Alright, so let's begin here. So, 3D Studio Max. When you open it up the very first time, after you've licensed it, or after you've got your educational version, you'll always be greeted with this screen, which is actually pretty cool. They do have some learn how to use the damn program in here. Which, again, is great. But 90% of the time, you'll probably just click close. Why? Because in a matter of moments, you're going to be all pro on this thing. No worries. Another couple things, in case your computer is a little low on resources or it doesn't really run this the smoothest, the first thing I would advise is right up here, there's this toolbar. The graphite modeling tools. That's something they've put in more recently, last couple years. Right now I'm running 2013, the year is 2016. I think it was 2013 was the first year it was put in. It might be 2012. But what you can do, because this toolbar is not optimized, and while I should show people how to use it more, I don't. So right here with this light bulb, just uncheck that, whole bar goes away. It actually saves quite a bit of overhead. Same with this viewport layout tab, this tool tray right here. I usually drag that out because it's useless and close it. Now when I say things like useless, that's just for my workflow. A lot of these menus can be customized, moved around, and depending on what your focus is and what you're trying to accomplish, I mean, everything is here for a reason. Just because I don't use it doesn't mean it's worthless. That's for certain. But today is going to be basics. And then we'll ramp up into actually modifying primitive shapes, things like that. So, to start off, we have our 4 viewports. Right now they are the top, the front, the left, and perspective. Right now, I'm going to make a box here in the top viewport, just to show you here. Right now you'll notice that this box is just a wireframe, like it says up here, wireframe. And in the perspective it's realistic. Ooh. On any of these you can actually change wireframe, and it highlights. And you can change it to shaded, which is usually what I work in. Consistent colors means it doesn't actually take any shadows. Typically, edged faces, as flat as can be. Or, you can always go to wireframe. It's pretty common for these 4 viewports to change. I don't know, it really depends on your workflow. These 4 I typically keep in an orthographic, like a straight-on view like this. Left, top, front. And this one I always leave in my perspective. Now these viewports, you can actually maximize if you want to get more real estate on your screen. There's this button way down here called Maximize Viewport Toggle. Click it once, it's big. Click it again, it's small. You're going to see me doing this, but without the click. I'll be probably working in the mesh, like moving it around, and hitting it's Alt-W. Alt-W maximizes and minimizes that same viewport. And it just depends on which one you have selected. I'm doing this by just right-clicking in that window. If you right-click once, it highlights it. If you right-click the second time, then you get your right-click menu. So it's like you have one working viewport at a time. So you can select a different window and do the exact same thing. You can. This is one of the handiest things there is. And you might have noticed that this object, as I rotated it, which we'll get to that, you'll see this cube up here. It's called the U cube. It actually moves as well. That is, some people find it extremely handy, rather than going up in here and saying, oh, I want front viewport. Instead, you can actually just use the handles on this and click top, left, right. You can even click the edges to get a 3/4 view. If you... I don't know how to change between orthographic and not. But orthographic, as you can see, all the lines are completely equal to orthographic. That's what that means. There's no distortion. But here, in the same port, you can change between orthographic and perspective. Perspective is how your eyes would see the shape. There's curve to the object, again, versus orthographic. So, quite a difference. Again, these orthographic views are wonderful when you need to line things up in a straight line, or to see it in a blueprint-like fashion. Perspective is great when working to get a more natural feel, and you can move the model around and say, well, is that just right? Is that the curve? Is that smooth enough? And you won't really get that in orthographic views. Alright, so before we get into the controls and how to do the things, just a really brief overview on what's up top. Some of these we're going to skip because they're not typical for a new user, like linking. Linking is like a hierarchy where you can parent child objects to parent objects to more parent objects. So if you move one, it moves all of them, etc., etc. That's a pretty simple concept, but again, it's not something we're really going to be using. The main thing we're going to be looking at right now are these guys right here. This is the Select and Move tool. So when you click that, and you'll notice right now the box is green, and it's kind of green in every viewport. When you select the box, so I got my Move widget, which is what I wanted, and the box is highlighted white. It's always white for your selected object. And all three of these tools, there's the Move tool, the Rotate tool, and the Select and Uniform Scale tool. They're amazingly helpful. A lot of the time when you're using these, you're going to want to always use these handles. That's what we call them. It moves it along its axis. Now you can click and drag and you'll move it, right? But as you're moving it, if you're like, oh shit, I didn't want to move it that far, you can right click while holding your left click. You can right click, it snaps back to its original position. This works for all the tools. Say you were scaling this and you realized, oh, I didn't mean to scale it, I meant to grab my Rotate tool. You can hit the right click button and go back. I mean, of course you can scale it up super stupid and then undo, Control Z. Of course there's an undo function. But just a handy little thing to note. So yes, moving, you can see we have each axis, we can highlight each arrow. Also we can highlight in between them, which means I'm going to move it along this plane. And you can see in my left camera over here how it looks like it's just moving up and down. That's because it's locked to the ZX plane. Things like that will be extremely handy when we get into manipulating the actual vertices of the mesh. All these rules apply to the other tools as well. This is the rotation tool. Looks pretty crazy, right? But when you highlight each one of these lines, it makes sense. It's just an axis. An axis. Someone better correct me about that. So, this one really doesn't have two axes at the same time. Two axes. It's just one at a time. And as you rotate it, you'll kind of see these numbers appearing above. These also appear in the other viewports. You can still use these tools in the other viewports. And you can see how it's changing by whole angle numbers, like whole numbers. It's not being 18.65 or anything like that, which is kind of nice. Scale tool, same thing. If you click in the middle, scales all directions, which is most of the time how you use it. Sometimes you just want to scale one direction, so you can just scale by one angle. The other is this guy between the two, this like little bridge. This will scale it along its axis. Just that axis. It will be for 30 and over. Pretty handy when you want to make things like a pipe, or I don't know, all sorts of stuff you can do with that actually. I'm sure I'll be using all of these shortly. So, those are the basics on the move tools. Oh, the last thing about them, actually there's a fourth tool I just want to interrupt myself. This guy here, select object. Select object is literally for selecting an object. Like, you can't move anything. This is actually really helpful when you have tons of different pieces of geometry and you want to get that specific one. Clicking and highlighting will get you a marquee selection of objects. Let me just duplicate a couple of these guys here. Get them in different ways. Just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So we have these three boxes. If I wanted all three, I can highlight all three. If I want just these two, I can select those two. Now you're able to do this with, I have the move and select tool on right now. But again, if you're concerned about which one am I trying to select, and I don't want to bump any of my meshes on accident, like, I meant to select that one. Oh no, everything's ruined. You'll avoid that by using your select move or your select object. So these four tools are mapped to the Q, W, E, and R buttons. Q, W, E, R. A lot of the time you just bounce between W, E, and R. R is easy to remember. Well, that's a lie. I was going to say R is easy to remember because it means rotate. It doesn't. R is scale. E is rotate. W is move. It's just something you kind of get used to. And, with patience and practice, it becomes second nature. Same with the Alt W. W is for moving. Alt W is for maximizing, minimizing viewport. Now there are a lot more controls around these lines, like scale 2 you'll see has a little black drop down arrow right next to it in the corner. If you click and hold on that, you'll actually get different forms of scaling. The default one, and the one you're going to use 99% of the time, is the one at the top. As you can see, it's a little box growing equally in size to the large box. If you hit R repeatedly, you might end up selecting one of the others. So when you actually scale, you're going to get really weird results. It looks like that, right? But if you're ever scaling and you're wondering what is happening, check up here. Make sure you've got the one on top selected. And then everything will be exactly as you wanted it. Alright. The last thing I'm going to show right now is kind of two things. It's how to render the scenes. And then I'll show you how to start actually controlling, manipulating the camera. So right up here there's this render setup. And when you open this, it's going to look real scary. There's a ton of stuff in here. It's all about how the scene is actually rendered. This is where you select, do I want a single frame, like what I'm seeing, or do I want a range of frames? Do I put those into a video? So you can do all of that here. And then, the videos can have transparency or keyed backgrounds, meaning for video editing, it's like a green screen effect. There's all sorts of things that you are able to do. Too many. Far too many. But right now, if you were to open this up, you'll see that we have a single frame, a single image selected. And right now it's set to 640 by 480. And we can change this to whatever size image we want. And that's literally the size image it'll pop out. So with this viewport selected, you can click render, and it'll render out an image. And you can save this as a PNG. And, well, PNG, JPEG, all sorts. If you wanted this to be 1920 by 1080, you just go in here and type it in. And render, and it's nasty. So, it's really handy if you're trying to composite things together, or even like, actually, in a weird way, you could almost say, what if this was some sort of logo for a game or a company, and you wanted this to be like 4 cardboard boxes, or 3 cardboard boxes. There's no reason you couldn't render this out and actually bring it into a image photo manipulation program like Photoshop, and actually like paint over this, or do anything to it to make it look the way you want it to. It's a pretty common trick because it has calculated shadows in it, and it's really handy. But of course, for the best effect that really puts in a lot of effort is just build it all right here, right now, and render it. This is right here, the render setup. You can see how it's a toggle, opens and closes. If you already know you have all your settings the way you want, you don't have to go in there. You can just click the teapot at the end. That's the render button. Easy peasy. So render setup allows you to set up your render, and then there's a render button. Super easy. Alright, moving on from there is actually how to move around in the scene. So going back to our box, we will, what's the best way to go about this? Well, I'll show you how to create a box, might as well, right? So, as you saw me do earlier, there's all sorts of primitive objects up here right away. This is called your create panel. This is probably the panel you spend the second most amount of time in, mainly because it's just the default. There's all sorts of stuff in here. There's lights, there's cameras, there's not really action, but there are systems. But for the primitives, we can go through and select cones, cylinders. Some of these you may not have heard of. Good old torus knots are the best, because you can make them all sorts of thickness. You want a donut, you want an inner tube, you want a hula hoop, instant, done. But we're going to go with the good old classic box. Now you can draw these out by clicking and holding once, or just clicking. What happened? Oh my god, technical difficulties. Box, click once, nothing happens. Click and drag, and you'll be dragging out one set of dimensions. And then when you release, you'll get the other dimension. And then you click, like if I want it super thin, then you click, and then we can just make this into a magazine if we wanted to. I don't know, that's what it reminds me of. These objects I just select, and you can hit your delete key, not your backspace key, but your delete key to get rid of them. Another way of doing it is to right click, and there's got to be a delete in here. Okay, good, there isn't. Use your delete key. Poof, gone, done. There will be a lot of shapes that actually have two, they act like the box, like the cone here. You click and drag, and it starts from the center out, because you're affecting its diameter. Then when you release, you get the height of the actual cone, because it's a cylinder, really. And then when you have your height set, you click, and again, you keep moving. You can expand the cone, you can make it 0 if that's exactly what you want, and there you go. Again, let's just take whatever shape that you want that fills your heart's desire. Oh, the last thing about making these objects. A lot of the time, it's a really good habit to actually make these objects in the top viewport. It used to be, it's kind of a holdover from the past. It doesn't happen so much anymore, but you can see when I get these selected how there's a Z facing up and X is that direction. Z and X. It used to be that creating it in the perspective port would change its natural bearing, its heading, or whatever you'd like to call it. It's how it's placed in the world space would not be similar to its brothers and sisters that you made. Which could be a problem if you're trying to actually export it into a game engine, and then suddenly all these pieces of a necklace are actually facing every other freaking direction, which is not what you wanted at all. So it's a good habit to just make things in the top viewport if you're going to be using things in other applications. If you're just doing it for art, and that's it, to make things pretty in Max and render them, doesn't really matter. I don't see why it would matter at all. And even if there's a problem, there's ways to fix it. So, alright, so now that we have our box selected, you can see here, like as we were making it, actually I'll do it again, as we're making this box, you can see the parameters over here are updating. You can actually change those after the fact. So now that I have my box made, you'd be like, well, what the hell? It's gone. How do you affect it? And that's where this modify panel comes in. Modify is everything, in my opinion. It is the majority, the far majority of where all the action happens in the app. When you're in here, it'll list, these are actually going to be layers or modifiers, they call them, and here's a modifier list. Actually, I should start from the top. Box 1, that's the name of our object. This orange is, by default, the color of the box, but also its outline of the box. I just ran into a problem here. I should stop and note this. Just how, like, when we hit R for our scale tool, and it changes type, so does happen with our cube. So our select object, it actually comes in many different forms. Yes, there's even a spray version. Typically you just use a box. But if you ever need it, which sometimes happens, you can actually select by radius, which is kind of nice. Now, I just realized how convoluted it is. You either keep hitting the button until you go back to square, or you can click here and get the type of selection you want. Okay, so with an object selected, you can now, in the Modify panel, modify the object. Now you can either enter parameters here, so I'll do 10, 10, 10, 101, yeah, perfect. 10, 10, 10, and look at that, it's a perfect cube. It's perfect in every way. Thanks, Obama. Jeez. Alright, there. Continue my Windows key. So, perfect cube. Isn't it lovely? You can do that by setting hard values, or you can click on these handles and hold forever, which I don't suggest. Or you click the handles, doesn't matter which one, you just move your mouse up and down. Which is really, this is how I'll do a lot of stuff. Unless it's for, you know, precise, making very precise object where I actually have measurements, then I'll use measurements. But a lot of the time I click and drag these handles to get it, you know, roughly the shape I need it to be. There's also, we'll wait on that. Alright. Mysteries yet to be discovered. Alright, we're going to go back to our perfect cube. Now, you've learned how to select, you've learned how to change parameters, you've learned how to create an object. You still haven't learned how to move the camera around other than using this guy up here. I really never use the view cube unless I'm in a hurry and I want to go to like my front viewport. But I mean, even then, if I wanted to, there's actually the F key for front and T for top. It's in the top viewport right now. And now F front. P is perspective. Yeah, I really don't use the view cube. Very rarely. So how I'm moving around like this is left click selects objects, right click gives you a rollout. Your middle mouse click, you actually need a mouse with a mouse wheel. That's how you zoom. With a mouse wheel, and the middle mouse wheel has to be able to click down. Most mice that come out nowadays actually have that. It's not fancy. It's standard. If your mouse doesn't support that, some gaming mice actually don't, but those mice typically have 80 more buttons, so you can really program any button to that if needed. But 99.9% of the time, yeah, you got your middle mouse, so clicking and holding, you can see it turns into a little hand, translates the image in front of us. This works in all viewports. This isn't just perspective. You can move all these viewports around. Now, take note, you can see the grid and how that grid, the dark X, actually is our coordinates of 0, 0, 0. How the grid is moving. We're not moving the object, we're just moving how we see the object. And then, how to rotate is you hold Alt and middle mouse click. That's how you move around. Up, down, left, right, all angles, doesn't matter. Even upside down, you want upside down, you can have upside down, that's fine. I wouldn't suggest it, but you can do it. So Alt, middle mouse click. If you gotta move it left or right, it's just middle mouse, Alt, middle mouse, rotates around. Sometimes you'll actually work on complex objects that has like quite a few shapes in it, and say I want to work on the one in the back, and so I'm like, okay, I'll rotate my view, I can try and zoom in, and I can't zoom in anymore. What is going on? Well, that's actually not the most sound way of looking at an object. You need these tools. You need to move around, and you need to zoom, and you need to pan, yes. But here comes another shortcut key, and it surprises me how many people I've met actually in the industry or very close and getting into the industry that actually are very familiar with Macs, and they still don't know this simple key. If you select any object, actually if you select anything in the scene at all, and you hit Z, it snaps to fill the viewport. Now I believe there's a button for this that's zoom to, I think it's zoom stents all. Yes, that's the button. So if you have, this guy selected and you click this button here, again, it fills all viewports, not just one if you click that button. I don't find that as helpful. If you have nothing selected and you hit Z, it will put all the objects in that viewport as tightly as it can. You can see how on these two dimensions, again, there's a little padding, but it did its best to center it in the view. Meanwhile, this is all one dimension. This is looking down the line, so it just literally snapped it really big in front. Same goes with perspective. If you have nothing selected and you hit Z, it just does its best to try and center the camera between all objects in the scene. We're actually pointed at an invisible spot right here in the middle. Giving that's what's happening with no objects selected, you can also have, I'll get my key back, two objects, and you can zoom into this area, and you see the control point I have here, the widget, is the center of all objects selected. So when I hit Z, that again is where it's trying to look at. So if you're trying to work on an individual piece, this is great by just hitting selecting the object, hitting Z, and looking at it. This will come up more momentarily as we begin to actually manipulate these objects, because, as we all know, video games aren't just mainly made of boxes, although there are a lot of boxes in games. Now, I say games because that's kind of my background. Working in game industry, now our company has migrated more to a software solution for pretty much everything because we do video games. The video game industry is ridiculous. It's a lot of work and cutting edge technology and amazing feats of creativity. Meanwhile, it is the hardest thing to do and probably the least, the most mistreated and the least paid. So that is a whole discussion for another time. I've got a couple friends. One of them's watching right now. Dice, I see you out there. He's been in the industry. Actually, I'd be open to having more talks with people, even postmortems on how the projects went, things like that. That might be something in the future. But getting on a tangent here. That is for another time. Alright, so Dice would just like to let everyone know that I lied and that video games are not made out of boxes, they're actually made out of triangles. Now, if you understand what he's talking about, congrats to you. Alright, before we really get started with manipulating this box and changing this box into something else, I want to go over just a few more hotkey little things, little tips on how to navigate the scene and things like that. So, with an object selected, earlier you saw us have the move, the rotate, and the scale tool. Now when you change these, you notice it highlights up here. Something else changes. Down here in the bottom, these numbers actually change. And what that means is, like this here, now I'm on my move tool. These are the coordinates of the root of my object. Now the root of an object can change. With a cube, it's the very middle of the bottom. That's the first plane we created of the box. So that's where it says the origin is. That's just how it is. So if we want, we can actually put this at solid 5, all of these, or we could set them to 0. If we want it dead center, we'd 0 every one. Or again, you can click on the handles and drag and move it around as such. Yes, the actual mouse does wrap around the screen as you do this. So you can send it off into Never Neverland. So right now I can see the box is at 500, way off the screen. I want it at 0. I could type in 0, or you can just right click on these handles. Instead of left clicking to change it, you can just right click, boop, turns to 0. Right click, right click, right click, it is all zeroed out. Same with rotate. You can actually rotate through these instead if you'd like, to not use the widget, which can be handy, especially in an engine if someone comes back to you and says, this needs to be rotated on this axis, then awesome. You just do it that way. Again, same with scale, except this is the uniform scale. I prefer actually to use the widget in pretty much all of these. The scale tool, as you can see here, so we're going to select this, the ZX axis. It's just going to scale in the 2. When I click and hold and I drag, these numbers down here are actually changing. And you can see they're percentage based because that's really what scale is. So if you needed an object to be 50% of what it was on those axes, you just kind of hunt and peck and find the sweet spot. Boom. 50% of what it was before. Now, don't fret, I'm just doing this with Control-Z, Control-Y, which is undo, redo. It's not that magical. Again, this goes for all the tools. Rotation, you got your widget at the top to tell you how many degrees, but you also have it down here at the bottom. Moving, all that. All of them will inform you. You can also rotate this 90 degrees, enter. Well, that's a terrible example because you're not even going to notice. 45 degrees. There you go. You can also put commands in here. Again, right click, clean and out. Dead center. Alright, so let me think of a couple things that can go wrong. Some of you right now that might be watching this are on your move tool, you have it selected, and instead you're seeing this. This is a problem I ran into a lot of when I was learning 3D Studio Max in my first month. I'm like, okay, I have my rotate tool, select the object, where the hell's my widget? Well, we hit the Z button to zoom into the object, Z for zoom. But there's a button right next to Z, X, and X actually hides the widget. All widgets, all the time. It's not per widget. You hit it once, it's gone regardless of what tool you select. So be warned of that. Two other things that kind of drive me crazy are, you can see on this box we have these handles. That's what they're called, handles. To get rid of them, because, well, I'll reserve that rant for later. To get rid of them, you can hit G. Oh no, G's for grid. I'll Z angle. I thought it was H for handles. Let's go look in the object properties. Edges only. That really bothers me. H is for this, G is for grid. J? J. I knew it was right in the center somewhere. So G is for grid. That was the other thing I was going to show everyone. Sometimes working on an object grid's cool because it represents a ground. Many objects are placed on the ground. It makes sense. Sometimes though, it's not helpful. It's not beneficial at all. No, just get rid of it. Especially when I'm working on objects that are like this scale, then it just seems dumb and annoying to be annoying. So, I don't hide it. So G is for grid. You can just toggle it. J is for the handles. The handles can be helpful, especially for someone who's new. Now, I'll get to this in a second, exactly what I'm doing, but I just want to set this up so you can see what the handles do. So you can see this is actually all one object, all of this. And if we go into our other viewports, you can see that they're all the same color. Typically, not always, but typically it means that they're the same object. By the way, you can change that up here. There's just a default key of objects. Now remember, this color not only shows the default, what the default is, but the most important part is it actually changes the outline in your viewports. And as you can tell, blue is a really bad choice. Usually I actually like to either go with black, as weird as that sounds, or some really light color, like a yellow or a, because it just stands out like a sore thumb. Oh, also in these other viewports, G for grid, and the J for the handles don't work, but the G for the grid works on this as well, in case you don't want those in your viewports. Then it looks kind of lost and weird. Alright, so you can see the handles, they're actually there to show that this is where the object resides. It's kind of like a bounding box, which actually could be really helpful if sometimes weird things happen where some pieces go missing and you're looking at it and worst case scenario, because this does happen to people. So like this. here's the object. Right now we have one plane, one box. But we select it, and why is it all the way over there? Eventually you'll find out there is data over there. There's one little vertice just sitting out there. One little point of that box out in the distance. So that is why the bounding box is actually helpful. Again, I don't really care for it. I usually leave it off unless I'm having problems. Like, I want to center on this box. I want to look exactly on this box, and I hit Z and it does this. Then I know something's up. Something's going on. And what's going on is this guy. He needs to go away. Awesome. What else? Alright, cool. So, I would say that about does it for the very beginning. Very brief overview of everything. Now we're gonna ratchet it up to the next gear and check out the actual mesh manipulation. The best thing we could probably make for a demo is a box, like a crate, because that's where everything begins, right? Every game has a crate, even if you don't realize it. It's just a thing. Alright, so we're going to select box, we're going to go to the top, we're going to drag out some sort of squarish shape. Now that that is there, zero it out. I have my move tool selected, I have the object selected, I'm going to right click, zero it out. Why? Of course I have it, no real reason. Now we're going to go to the modify panel, and I want this to be cubic. So we're going to do, let's do 30. Do 30, 30, 30. Cool. Alright. In the live chat, Dice is saying he wants a Taurus. Make a Taurus, but I've never seen a box that's like a Taurus before. I'm sorry. Alright. Now things are going to get interesting. So, where to start? Whoops. Accidentally hitting the help button. Alright, cool. After we do this box, we can go even further and we'll try another shape and go crazy with it. Alright, new hotkeys, and honestly, probably the last hotkeys that you need to know. You know, WER, well, Q, WER, those are your object manipulation tools. Z is for zoom, X is an accident button that hides and shows your widget. G is for grid if you want to get rid of it. J is for grid, the handles, and there's only two more sets of hotkeys that I can actually think of right now. One set of them is your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons, literally 1 through 5, which we'll get to in a second. The other ones are F2, 3, and 4. F2, 3, and 4 are probably the second most used other than the QWER. Again, QWER are your movement, but F2, 3, and 4, primarily F3 and 4, are used when modeling. And what they do is F3 will change you automatically from shaded to a wireframe viewport. This can be really handy when you want to select this vertice or this vertice, and not both of them. So knowing that you can see through your shape and what's on the other side when you make a selection of some kind is really handy. As well as, well, yeah, that's about it. There's so many reasons that this is actually helpful. The other thing is F4. F4, you can see, toggles this edge highlight. Again, this is extremely helpful. because it highlights all the edges of the model you're working on. Most of the time when I'm working on an object, it's on. It's not even off. And you can toggle. You can have your edge highlight on and hit wireframe and just pop right to it. No big deal. So everybody's probably seen little 3D humanoid and how they have all these edge loops, all these like squares that make up their body, right? Those are called segments. And as you can see here, length segments, you can actually here automatically add them. And yes, you can create a stupid amount of them, but we don't want that. If you add one to each dimension, you can see how it just kind of quarters up the entire box. There's a lot of other ways to create edge loops, but if you have a really, really good idea of what you want to create and how it's going to have to like look to do that, like this Rubik's Cube right here, then just go for it, you know. For our example though, just to keep it simple, we're going to create it all blank, just a cube. And we're going to create a crate shape out of this. We're not going to texture it, we're not going to make it look, but the model will be of a crate. So yeah, F2, 3, and 4. F2 doesn't do anything yet, and it'll show up, don't worry. But 3, wireframe, 4, edge highlight. Very, very helpful. Alright, so now that we have a box, this box is just a primitive. There's not a whole lot we can do with it. In fact, right here, this is everything we can do with it. Again, it's not very helpful. Earlier, we had said this is the name of the object, blah, 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 and there's this modifier list. And actually, this here is a list of modifiers. But right now, there's box. What a very exciting modifier. We want to modify the box. So what we do is we click this list, and you will see a ton of stuff. There's be able to bend, there's cloth manipulation, there's mirror, meaning to actually mirror one side to the other. There's ripple effects, spherify, which means take this shape, whatever the shape is, it could be a box, it could be a clown, and it's going to actually smoosh it into a sphere. There's so many things here, so many things. As you use it, and as you look around online or search forums or do tutorials, you'll realize that out of all of these, you're probably really only going to be using around 10 to 14, like total. Primarily you'll be using 4. There's probably 4 that you'll always be like, nope, I need that for this situation, I'm going to grab it, I'm going to use that. In our case, we want to edit this set of polygons. What we put on there is edit poly. Edit poly is the bread and butter of Max. Edit poly gives you all the tools, all sorts of tools. Many, many, many wonderful things happen here. This is, this right here, editable poly, is 90% of how every model is made. Really. I mean, it depends. There's advanced techniques of sculpting and bringing it down into Max or Maya, and then cleaning the model. But again, if you have to clean your sculpt, you're doing it typically in something like this. Unless, there's an in-house plugin made to clean it up or anything like that. But, all things aside, editable poly, that is the place to be. What I like to do, force a habit, is actually drag this toolbox out. So I have two rows of all my tools. You can see some of these are collapsed, and that's fine. It's not a big deal. So what this means is, this editable poly, is if you expand this plus symbol, you will see vertex, edge, border, polygon, and element. We have 5 subcategories. We also have 5 red buttons right here. They're the same 5. If you click vertex, either one will highlight. Edge, either one highlights. And you can see the actual toolbox will change with some of these. Not much, but some of them certainly will. A lot of the tools are shared between the modes, so it's not that big of a deal to learn new things. Some tools will only be available in one and not the other, and in a moment you'll kind of understand why. So, to go between these, you can expand the modifier and select which thing you wish to manipulate, or you can select the buttons here if you like instead, or you can use 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's the other set of hotkeys I was telling you about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can actually do 6 too. 6 exits the object. They call it leaving sub-object mode. So whenever you're in a vertex, edge, border, polygon, or element, they call it being in sub-object mode. That means the pieces that create the object, you are sub-object right now. And you can actually be in sub-object and leave and try to do other stuff on other objects and come back to it, and it's still this way. That's kind of bad because you can still accidentally move things when you're in sub-object mode. If you're done working on the vertices of this object, you should always leave sub-object mode. It's a really good habit to get into. Otherwise, you're kind of leaving your object open and vulnerable to get manipulated in any other ways. And parents don't like that. So, make sure to always leave sub-object mode when you're done working on it. So, what are these sub-object modes? Well, vertex, you can see when we select it, we get these little blue dots. Those are vertices. Vertexes. No, it's vertices. Those are, the points of manipulation. That means if we had our move tool, we could select one of these guys either by clicking it or marquee selecting, or selecting 2 splits the difference, and we can move it. We can manipulate it. Now, as you can see, there's some oddities that happen because, typically you just won't make a shape like that. And you can see how this will get really out of hand really fast if you're just kind of moving things around willy-nilly. Now we have a shape that's all twisted inside out. Totally defies reality. It's a bad idea. So we're just going to undo a bunch. Undo. Alright, we're back to where we are. A lot of the time, this is where the orthographic ports come in handy. So we can take these 2 objects, scroll them down like so, or pull them up or out, and then we know it's actually staying even. This kind of reminds me of a coffin, right? Is that bad? So yeah, coffin shape. Boom, done. Or, so yeah, and the same thing happens with multiple selections. If you want to rotate, you can. Some of these hotkeys, actually, that's a really good thing that happened. Oh, question from Mission Live Chat. The key press to bring up the orthographics? I'm sure there's one because there's a hotkey for everything. But I usually just go here. It's perspective. No, P and U. P is perspective, U is that. Is perspective. I knew P was perspective, but I didn't know U was orthographic. Wow. Awesome. Yeah, as you can tell, there's the hotkey markers all over the place on here. Because I just had this accident actually happen to me. So I had these 2 vertices selected, and I wanted to hit the R key to go to my rotate, or my scale tool, right? and that's fine. That all works fine. If I hit E, what's happening? It's not selecting my rotate tool. But if I hit E, you'll notice this extrude is getting highlighted. That's because in sub-object mode, those hotkeys take precedence over every other hotkey out there. So there will be times when you're in this mode and you want to hit E to rotate and you're not seeing the widget. That's why, because when you hit E and you look up here, it's not selected. So, just another warning of oddities that can happen. So yeah, even rotate, you can rotate these around each other. Again, takes the average point between them. Same with scale. Scale is actually sometimes really helpful with stuff like this when you want it to be equal. When you want to, or even collapse it down to like the very middle point. It will always be the middle point, as you can see in these other views. So yeah, all of your mesh manipulation tools still work up here. So moving on. Those are vertices. Edges. It's the second one. Edges are exactly what they say. Edges. So instead of selecting the point, the vertice, we're selecting an entire edge and moving it. Earlier I had both of these vertices selected, and it was I was doing essentially the exact same thing. Border. There's really no borders on this one. What is a border? Well, I'll show you in a little bit. Number 4, polygon. Polygon is exactly that. It's the actual polys. Polys are typically referred to as a four-sided object made up of two triangles, which is what Dice was getting at earlier. All games are made out of triangles for calculation's sake, not quads. Quads or polys, typically same thing, but when you're saying quads, you mean quads, four-sided polygons. So even that poly means many, right? So earlier we talked about the F4 to highlight edges, F3 to go wireframe, and then F2, which I skipped because there wasn't time. Now's the time. If you select any of these faces in polygon mode, you'll see how it gives a red border. But it's still kind of hard to tell, especially on a mesh that's really complicated, which one of these it is. So what you can do is hit F2, and it actually highlights the face, the entire face. And again, it's just a toggle. If you want to turn it on, it's on. If you want to turn it off, it's off. They both are useful, both modes. This also affects wireframe mode. When you're in wireframe and you hit F2, it'll also highlight. This can be handy for when you select an object on the backside. You'll notice that it's darker than here. That's a brighter red, that's a darker red. So we'll give you an inkling to, oh wait, that's the face that the camera can see, not this face inside. And then F2 just toggles it. Really, really, really handy, especially when working in wireframe mode. The last one here is element. Element is, well, there is that. Element. It's the whole thing. F2 also applies to this. Say you had a mesh like a gun, and the bolt action, and the stock, and the barrel, they're actually, it's all one model, but they're actually different pieces of the exact same model. Then you could select them by element. An example of this would be, and I'll show you how to do this later, is if you have an object, say like this. Now if you wanted, you could go in and try and select all the verts of this little box, this little rectangle, by selecting that and then holding, well, we'll get in that in a sec, and like selecting all of these and then manipulating it. And that's fine. But you could also select by element and just click it. And ta-da! It's the whole object. They're independent of each other. Elements, it's kind of an odd thing because, like bones of a skeleton, they are one whole thing. It's a skeleton, right? But in reality, a lot of models aren't one model. I'll show you what I mean by this in a second. I'm just blowing through this because for tutorial's sake. So right now you see they're the exact same thing, right? Exact same thing. Actually, this is one model. This is two models. Exact same thing. If I have this box selected and I wanted to go an element, again, that's a different model. So it actually doesn't apply at all. And a lot of things like game rigs for a skeleton, or even a model of a skeleton, they might not actually be all one model. It'll look like one, but it'll actually be different pieces just sitting in the exact right spot where it needs to be, right? I mean, a lot of things are actually made like that. Like, you could do a kind of Minecrafty looking lamppost right here, just with this, and you can realize right away that while the model might look like a model, it's actually two parts. There's reasons for doing it, and there's other reasons to not do it. It all depends on what your end goal is. If this was a game model, there's pros and cons to both. That's pretty advanced. We can talk about that later. Again, just remind me if anybody does want to know about optimization for games and why separate meshes for an object is better or worse in what conditions. We can talk about that some other day. But just know that element means you're selecting the pieces, individual whole pieces that aren't connected to each other within the same exact model, the same editable poly mesh right here. So we know that delete deletes things. We looked at that earlier. If we go into polygon mode and we select a face, we can delete and get rid of that face entirely. It's pretty cool, right? That's where border comes in, because that, if you highlight even the whole object, what it does is it highlights kind of like raw edges, open edges, edges that don't have another face joining them. That can actually be really handy. There's ways of, selecting. Actually, what's really handy about it is when you're creating a mesh, and what if it's like really complex, and you want to know, like, if you goofed up anywhere, if you deleted something you shouldn't have. It's actually pretty cool to, like, zoom out, highlight the whole mesh. If there's no holes, there will be no selection at all. It just won't be there, like this. There's nothing. That's kind of a good thing. Then you know you don't have any holes in your model. So sometimes I use it as a troubleshooting tool. A lot of the time I use it for, we can show you how to do this momentarily, but border, scale, stuff like this, where I want it an equidistant kind of, so now it's like a hutch or cubby going on in there. So it's a handy little guy. So it selects edges that do not form a face. Yes, borders do exactly that. Great way to put that, guys. Borders select edges that do not form any face. There's a face on one side over here, but there's nothing on the other. So. Awesome. Alright, so a couple object manipulation tricks here. So let's say we have a box, say we want a couple of them. We could right click, we could right click and go to clone, which we can do then a copy of our object. Instance and reference, we can get into that later, but typically you just want a copy. So you can do that, and you can put in a brand new name for it. So this is box 2, awesome. And then you can move it, and then you can right click this one and clone it, and hit OK, and you'll see it updates the tag, box 3, and OK, and, you can do, and that will take forever. Or you can hold down your shift key, select an arrow, drag it out. I'm still holding shift, and keep holding shift and let go. If you do that, you'll get that same screen. You can just hit OK. Shift, we call it shift dragging. So if you shift drag, release, you get clone. You get clones everywhere. You can just undo it. Now sometimes it's actually really cool if you want to get something like equidistant, like, I mean, we could say, this is a terrible example. Actually, no, here. Uh-oh, get out of here, brother. Alright, this is a better example. Let's use our scale tool, and we're going to squish it down this way, real thin, then this way, and we're going to say that this is a fence. It's just one fence slat. It's actually kind of thick. There we go. If we hold shift and we want to clone this slat to make another one, it looks good. It's too wide, so let's put it like here. You'll see the number of copies. You can actually turn this up to like 20 and hit OK. And they're all equidistant. They're all spaced exactly the same. It's such a fantastic tool to use. There's many cases that this is helpful. There's also, this clone tool isn't only limited to the move tool. Believe it or not, you can actually clone through rotation. So let's say I wanted to clone this by 45 degrees. Actually, let me change this thing's shape a little bit. Let's go back to here. So let's say I wanted one every 20 degrees, and we wanted 5 of them. Okay, and it'll actually spread them out. Isn't that the E-trade symbol? I think that's what that is. It just needs to be purple and green. So shift dragging, aka cloning, very helpful, very awesome tool, especially with the number of copies. It's really handy. Oh, and then if you have multiple, so if you're on an object, say we're in vertex mode, and we want to select all these polys on the left side of this rectangle, we can just drag a marquee. Great, right? Now, if things get really complicated, you might not want to grab a selection. You might want to grab, one of each alternate or something crazy like that. So if you click one vertice and then you hold Control, you can select another vertice. And again, Control click another vertice. So right now I have just these 3 alone. Yes, I know that's wonky. There's really no reason in this particular example to do that. But I'm just letting you know that you can marquee select or you can control select. You can also use the marquee and just hold Control if you know what you're doing, which typically you'll want to use wireframe for to make sure you're not selecting the one in the back, or maybe you want to select the one in the back. So Control is your friend. Trying to think of, no, Alt doesn't do much. Alt is just for camera rotation. Control is for selecting multiple. Same thing goes for its faces. If you want to select a couple faces, let's say I want to select the top and bottom of this, I would select the top, rotate to the bottom, hold Control, and click that one. Now I have the top and bottom selected. Yeah, I think that's it for those basics. We're going to undo this a couple times. So I'm hitting undo and you're not seeing much happen right now. The reason for that is, I'm going to forward a bit. The reason for that is, if you enter back into this mode, remember I was selecting multiple vertices and things? You undo, slowly you'll see it actually keeps track of which vertices you had selected. Each one is an action that you can undo. So right now I have 4 verts selected, which is also shown here, by the way, 4 vertices selected. If I undo once, it'll undo my 1 selection, 3, 1, 2, and then even 0. So pretty much doing anything in Max other than rotating the camera around will register itself as an action that can be undone, which is really helpful. Again, complex meshes, when you're trying to select that one and you got a horrible angle and they're that close together, you accidentally select this guy, you don't want to, you just undo and select the one you want. Handy, handy, handy. Alright. So, the undo history, just like most applications, has a limit. So that's as far back as I can go. I can't get my cube back ever again, which is fine. We're just going to create another one. Well, I'll create another one. You can keep your cube. Unless you goofed yours up, then you should probably recreate yours. So you can see I want to make a cube, a perfect cube. I didn't even try. Don't even care. Because I know exactly where I want it to be and what size I want it to be. So 30, 30, 30, clear out its position. There we go. Hit Z to zoom in. Fantastic. Alright. This list also, if you just click it once, so you get it to pull down and you start typing, so edit, you'll see that it kind of snaps. So P will bring you to the P's, S to S's, E to E's. You want editable poly. In this case, edit poly. Edit poly, editable poly. They're both in there. They're pretty much identical. Alright, so we'll just explore this modifier list for a moment here. What this is the box is still here. And it still has parameters we can manipulate. Now the edit poly is just the layer on top and it's affecting it. There are some things that you can do with this. Like we'll just move this vertex over. Now if you want to go back to your box object, it'll say, hey now, there's a modifier on top of the stack already. Are you sure you want to go back? Now this is very scary. By going back, you can select hold yes, that's typically what you do. Or you select no to be like, no, I didn't mean to do this. So hold yes. So what it tries to do is send you back to the box, yet keep your changes. So let's just say we wanted it taller. It's actually keeping the information in the editable poly, which is pretty damn awesome. And then you can go back up to it and continue working. Why is that helpful? Very rarely is it helpful. But sometimes it's necessary when you're trying to get a feel. And usually you do it only at this primitive stage. Modifiers, again, are just like layers. You can have multiple of them. You can also just delete them. And it pops back to what it was. Again, deleting a modifier, you can undo it. It's not like an action that can't be undone. You can, so a lot of the time, like how I was taught actually, was not even to apply the edit poly modifier. I was taught to get the box, and I think it was because he just didn't want to try to explain that idea to us with the layers. But he'd say, get the box out, right click on it, and you can do editable poly right here. The difference between edit poly and editable poly is edit poly is a modifier. You saw it in the list, it goes on the stack. Editable poly, when you click this, there's no more box. The box is gone. We can't go back to that. Well, we could if we hit undo, but it's gone. So editable poly is exactly near on exactly the same thing as edit poly's modifier. Another thing to reinforce the idea of layers is you can actually take the object and let's say we're going to do something like this with it. Some crazy shape. And what we can do is add an editable poly and change that shape. And add another editable poly and say, oh, well, we didn't want it that way. We wanted it, flatter than that. So I'm going to change it to this shape. So you see we're stacking all these modifiers. And there's a little light bulb next to it. That's because you can actually hide what effect that layer has. Now this can be really helpful if you have some sort of shape you're very happy with. You like the way it is, and yet you want to go further. You want to try something else with it. Because we'll just say that this shape here, this goofy ass dude, is my pride and joy. It's what I love. But I want to mess with it some more. Then I can put a layer on. And when I realize there's no improving perfection, you can right click and delete the editable poly layer and your changes are still there. So it's a good way to do it. Now the downside of having 20 editable poly layers is of course overhead. It'll chew up a lot of system memory if you start stacking up a ton of them. So it's not highly recommended to have a bunch, but I've had models that have 3 different editable poly layers for varying effects. And of course, I mean, you could just do, which I would do anyways, is just, by the way, this is the file menu, file save as, and just save out a copy or just save a new file. But just letting you know that if there's a shape you want to keep modifying, but you worry about the changes you're making, you just add another layer. And then if you don't like it, you can just delete the layer. Alright, now you see, this is a great example of why I should have done an editable poly right away before I made this shape, because now my cube is totally effed. And if I undo, it's never coming back. Oh, there it is. We do just have barely enough on here. Oh, but it's still an editable poly. Alright, new cube. No more Pepto cube. Ooh, a blue cube? Fancy. Alright, let's do some real work now. Now that we've been through the interface, we've been through some tools, we've been through key commands, shortcuts, things like that. Now, do some real business. First thing I'm going to do is change this to a crate light color. What's this look like? Yeah, that'll work. I'm going to take the box. I'm just going to convert my editable poly. Because I want a perfect cube. There's no going back. That's what I want. So. Now, all these 1,000,001 tools. These, I highly recommend just taking the time and tinkering with all of these tools in the modifier panel. I mean, literally, just select an edge and then look at the tool. I mean, a lot of them are self-explanatory. Remove. I wonder what that does. It literally did. Remove the edge, by the way. It's not there. There's other things like this extrude. So if you click it, you realize, oh, I got this funny little tool clearly because it's highlighted. Click and drag. What happens? What is this nonsense? I mean, that's kind of part of the learning process. It's just tinkering with things. But I will tell you, a lot of what you're going to do in here are from this toolbox. Always this edit whatever. So just edit vertices, edit edges, and edit polygons. verts, edges, polygons, that's really where everything happens. Border, not so much. Same with element, not so much. They're really handy when you finally need them. But a lot of the work you'll be doing are manipulating points, verts, manipulating the edges, or manipulating the entire polygons, whether it's a polygon or a set of polygons. So, as you can see down here, there was these toggle. A lot of these do, because they give you some sort of tool to tinker with. But what we are going to do is I'm going to show you what we call rollouts, these settings buttons. So if you have something selected, and if you click the rollout, you will get a little window. And these windows always have parameters of their own. As you can see, you highlight and they update. So this is height. Again, you can type in a value or scrub through the arrows. Outline, which means, that. There's also different modes, which we will get into later. Yeah, and if you like what you have, you hit the check mark. The plus is, as you can see, apply and continue. So you would apply this shape, and then it continues. So you could then, let's say, shorten it and make it, well, that's what can make us fallen over stumpy obelisk. So like, say you wanted something this kind of shape, or what have you. Yeah, you can either continue or apply it once. So, getting back to our box example, what I'm going to do is select all the faces. I can do this by clicking and dragging and rotating around, everything's in. I can also do Control A, just like web browsers, just like everything. Control A is select all. And we're in polygon mode of this object, so that means highlight all polygon faces of this object. If you have other objects around, you're not going to affect them at all. Actually, just for reference addition, let me make a copy of this, which I'm going to do by shift dragging. Copy, and one more just because it's going to be. Alright, so all faces selected. I'm going to go to Inset and select the rollout here. Now you see nothing's really happening. Kind of weird. Let's change this to by polygon. There we go. So we're gonna inset these by polygon. Per polygon, this is actually happening. Whereas the other one is the whole group. And if you try to inset the whole group, you're never going to do it. That's not possible. Again, tools you should play with to really get a feel for how they work. There's a lot of fun to be had inside this program. Alright, so we're going to set this in to make the rails of the box. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to hit the check mark OK. Now we still have these polygons selected after the fact, which is exactly what we want. And we can go here to settings, roll this one out, and this is extrude. I click the extrude rollout, and again, you can select these negative, positive. That's pretty cool actually. It's like a jack of doom. Alright. You can change this again by local normal, by polygon, by group. There's many options. Again, if you're getting the result you want, go for it. If you don't, tinker with the settings. You'll probably find the option that's gonna fix your problem. Alright, so let's insert this a bit. Just a bit. Boom, slam. Crate complete. Super easy. It's kind of remarkable actually, like how with just a couple of commands you can get a rough shape of exactly what you want. Even with things like a cylinder, right? If you have a cylinder, let's do something like this. Now this is going to be hokey, but just bear with me. And I want to rotate this 90 degrees. I mean, really, you could like just copy a bunch of these, right? and begin making a log cabin. Copy a whole group. Oh, I got a box in there. That's okay. I'll delete it. Get out of here. Do that. Can move them down so they're intersecting in the middle. Delete this one. Move it over. I mean, it's very basic, but you know, sometimes that's all you gotta do. A couple high quality textures. A lot of magic can happen with just simple shapes. Actually, let's talk about cylinders for a moment. Cylinders. Alright, box, you're going away. You've had your time. Get out of here. Time to play with Lincoln Logs. Alright, so you can see here, actually, like, what if you wanted to make a really high poly soap can? And you know, you're doing your render, and you see these stupid edges, and you're like, I don't want this. I can see that in there. If you go to the highlighted edges, oh yeah, you can see them in there for sure. Now there's a lot of geo going on right now that we might not need. So this is a cylinder object. You know, of course, different than a cube. Different math, different things going on. Height segments, you can see here. That's one height segment, meaning this is one segment high. If you want to split it in half, 2, so on and so forth. Height of it, radius of it. But let's say, you know, it's not smooth enough. Again, that's the benefit of having this edge highlight mode on and off, actually. And right now it's set to 18 sides. If we set it to 32, just because it's fun to double things, much smoother. Much, much, much smoother. But what happened between this and this? Well, we doubled the amount of faces that we have, which you can see right here. Actually created more edges, more loops, more edges, more. That's why it's called high poly. That's why high poly models look remarkable, because it's more information. So there's a question about, would it be much smoother with a Fong material? A material only gets you so far. What actually makes things look smooth are smoothing groups, they're called. Smoothing groups are really cool. Like, I was so frustrated when I first started learning Max because, well, I'll show you. First of all, I didn't know what I was doing. And that's okay. It's okay to not know what you're doing as long as you keep trying to know. So I had a box like this, and I don't know really what I was thinking. But I believe it's like I wanted to make like a knife blade or something, right? And for some reason, I don't know, I like inset a little bit. And then I extruded, and I said, well, I didn't want to extrude like that, but that's okay. I'll make it work because this is supposed to be, again, a knife blade. So we narrow this down. This is a terrible example, but this is probably exactly what it looked like when I started. So I'm like, oh, that's okay. I'm just going to smooth it all out. No problem. No problem at all. So this is going to be the point of the blade. This is the rest of the blade. And so I took these edges in here, which you can stuff one at a time. Or if it's a loop, which this is, you can just double click it. Got all the loops left. And I pulled it out. Just smooth it out. Because I was like, oh, that was derpy looking. Alright, no problem. Here's my horrible silhouette. For my really ugly knife. Close up knife. I'm going to scale it even thinner. Make this longer. And I'm like, yeah, this thing's awesome. But wait a second. What the hell are these lines? Like, why? Why is that a thing? The problem with that is actually smoothing groups. What are smoothing groups? Well, they are groups of polygons that have an ID assigned to them. So what I mean, and this might help, is this, so the cylinder, right? Notice how the sides look really, really smooth? And the top looks, well, top is flat. That is not because of some light calculation that Max is really doing by default. It's actually because it's set to look that way. And so, as an example, this knife here. You'll notice that if we go to polygon mode, there's actually this polygon material ID section and polygon smoothing groups, okay? And again, we have these really nasty kind of lines. This one's barely noticeable, but this one's definitely noticeable. So if you click on a polygon, this one is 7. What does 7 mean? It's more like it's a collection of objects. It's just saying this is of family 7. The one next to it, there is none. The one at the end, there is none. And even more so, the one at the bottom, well, that doesn't make sense. But let's look at this. So this side is 7. This one on the bottom is 2. This one on the top is 3. Now, to illustrate what this looks like on a cylinder, to help give you a better understanding of exactly what I mean. Okay, we're going to go editable polygon mode. We're going to click the top. It's 1. We're going to click this side, this guy right here. Its ID is 4. The one next to it is 4. The one next to it is 4, and so on. All of these, if you highlight them all, they're all 4. Now, if I took a couple alternating ones and changed their IDs, oh, that's what alt does, by the way. So control click is how I'm selecting these edges, or these polygons. And if I don't want one, I can hold alt and click it and it goes away. Control click to add, alt click to remove. So I have a couple of these selected. Right now they're all 4s, right? Well, we're going to say, no, you're not going to be a 4. You're going to be a 12. And when I click off, look what happens. It's no longer smooth anymore. It's got this ribbon look. Now what's happening here is it's just saying, you're an ID of 12. Are there any other 12s around? And there are not. Because you're surrounded by 4, a 4, a 1 at that end, and a 1 at the bottom end. So it actually makes it hard looking, right? Because there's nothing else like it to blend the shapes together. Again, like in the middle of this, so we have, that's a 4 and that's a 4, so we're going to change this back to a 4. See? Those 3 polygons, it looks like they kind of merge. Again, it's just how the light is kind of processed off the model. You actually determine how that happens. So back to the ugly knife blade. If we want these to not be ridiculous and different like they are right here, we'd actually want 1, 2, 3, all of them selected. You see how these are grayed out? This tells us that I have a 7 selected, a 10 selected, and a 18 selected. Now I can go through and click it once, click it again to clear it. And let's just set them all to ID. Now all these are smooth. They're all, when the light hits it, the calculation's made to make it smooth. This goes even further with, let's see if I can do this. Connect. So, see how this is like, get out of here grid. See how this is like the problems we're having right here? Again, this is a good reason why you want this to highlight on or off. On allows us to see what polygons are giving us trouble. Off allows us to see it as the viewer would see it. So, again, same problem here where, oh, well, this side's 32, so let's make these 32. And let's make it all 32. Everybody can come to a big old 32 party. Let's just Control A, select the whole, oh, wait a second, I called it. It's not what I wanted to do at all. I think it's on it. Yeah. Whoops. Yes. Alright. I'm getting used to this new keyboard, so I apologize. So let's just select all of these, and we're going to clear all. We're going to put all of 32. And you'll see that it gets weird. It gets really weird. It almost looks like, I don't know, vinyl or a doughy kind of softness. Which again isn't what we want, right? The back of a knife blade is typically starkly different than the other, the sides. So we're going to uncheck 32. We'll just make it 1. There. Now you can see how the spine is defined. Underneath, again, this is not a sharp looking edge at all. But we need it to blend the sides, right? We need this to be the same as the edge. Well, that means on this side, these have to be unique from the other side as well. So, we're going to use our select tool, not the move tool or anything else, just the select tool, and select these 3 and these 3. Remove 32, and let's just make it 31. Now you'll see that there's actually a kind of a sharp, quote unquote, sharp edge. It's kind of hard to see now that I think about it. Maybe we'll cheat and we'll just explode the knife again. Now you'll see how, oh, that calculation's still super weird. Materials help this a lot. Oh, that's part of the problem, this back. Let's just delete that. Get out of here. Give me the problems. That's where we're getting those weird shadows. So what I'm doing here to delete this back end is marquee select polygon mode, so I got everything, and Alt to deselect marquee, and all that remains is what remains, which is the end. Delete, good release. Now, most of my models don't look this shit. I'd be happy to let you know that. Just trying to enforce the idea of what smoothing groups are. And it can be really frustrating as a new modeler to be working on something, even as simple as like a box, right? And you want this to look, you know, a certain way. You want it to be, let's just say you want this to be like a log kind of shape, like a cartoony log. What I'm going to do is go into edge mode, select all my edges with Control A, and then chamfer with the rollout. And like, oh cool, we can chamfer it, that's nice. And we can even add more edge loops, right? To make this nice and smooth, right? Nice and smooth. That's not smooth at all. It's not smooth at all. That's because it's smooth loops. Now, a really quick, nice solution to doing all of this is you can select all the polygons and click Auto Smooth. Ta-da! What Auto Smooth does, there's this little number right here. And what Auto Smooth really does is it applies some sort of formula to an object where it says, what is the angle of the polygon next to me? That's what it really wants to know. And it goes from there. So, to illustrate this fact, these two edges, so this corner, is at an angle of, let's say, well, 90 degrees. This one, should we do 45? We'll do 45. That's what it is. So we'll do 45-ish. Well, 45-ish. And then we're going to make another edge. Shift drag to pull out another edge. Now I've been doing this for a while, so if there's questions, hopefully the developer's not there. So this is a 90-degree angle, this is a 45, this is going to be even less, this is going to be like 16-ish kind of deal. And I'll make this big. Just alright. Hey, this just reminded me of another handy tool. So if you right click, you can go to isolate selection. Guess what that does? It isolates your selection. So now I only have this. The other stuff still remains. It's still out there. But all I gotta worry about right now is this guy. And then you can right click and uncheck isolate selection, and you'll come back into the world where everything else is. So I'm going to isolate this just so we can focus exactly on this. I'm going to go highlight all this and set this to 30 degrees smooth. So this is 90 degrees, didn't smooth. This is again bigger than 30 degrees, didn't smooth, but this one's far less, so it automatically assigned these two as a value of 1, this one as a value of 2, and this one as a value of 1. Now why 1 again? Well, because they're not touching. And if you can reuse the same smoothing group IDs, you're going to save yourself just a tiny bit more of data. So why not, right? So select all. Let's turn this up to 45. Let's check how my angle was. 45. Yep, it's smooth. So now we have we have 2, 2, 2, and 1. And again, it's smoothest because the angle is 45 degrees. This is 45 degrees or less. So it said, okay, automatically these two should be shallow enough of an angle where they should look as if they're of the same object. So going up forward, of course, now we're going to go all the way up past 90 degrees. 101.7, sure, auto smooth. And it'll smooth those together. Now this doesn't make sense. There might be reasons to do this, especially for low poly modeling. But these two are now smooth. They now look like they are together. But in reality, it's a sharp 90-degree corner there. So yeah, that's smoothing groups and kind of how they work. The rule of thumb and what it is by default is 45. So feel free to use that, and that's usually all you need. There's going to be models where you want to separate out the smoothing groups, like the knife example, where you have two halves of the knife coming down to the actual blade, and one half of the knife needs to have a different ID than the other half, otherwise they're going to smooth together. The edge of the knife is actually going to look flat and smooth, and you don't want that. So in that case, you would maybe have to go in and manually do your smoothing groups. But yeah, that was a big irritation of mine when I started modeling. Again, like with the chamfer box. And it's like, I wanted more. And all it was giving me was these, they call it faceted. When you have a model like this, and you clear all, and it looks like this. Typically we say it's a faceted model, because you can see each individual face. And only the closest of the closest angles of an edge are going to look smooth. Even these, they are very shallow. They're very smooth edges. They really are. But it's enough where, in reality, no, it's not smooth. Alright, so we have boxes, we have cones, we have cylinders, toruses, and yes, even teapots, because you gotta have those. teapots are used for rendering experiments typically because of the curves and how a lot of the parts of the teapot actually face in on themselves, like how the handle faces in, the stem, the spout faces in, etc. So it's really good for render tests. Render tests, by that I mean like lighting and materials, reflections, ambient occlusion, etc., etc. So yeah, this should be enough, I hope, to get you started. I highly suggest taking these primitive shapes, converting them into editable polys, and then going in and playing with these selections, especially vertice, edge, and polygon. Those are the best of the best ones. They're going to give you the most options. And literally, play around. Quick rundown: extrude means to extrude the face. You can see how it's coming out from the face. Bevel is very similar to extrude, except bevel is both extrusion and a scalar to the final shape. Bridge isn't really used. It is, but it's a little more complex. Inset is used a lot. Insets. I was using it earlier. Flip is handy for when. So earlier we looked at see how bright red this is, and how dark that is. That's because we know we're looking at the back face of this polygon. If you hit flip, it actually flips the polygon around. So that back face, now that it's facing the other direction, it won't render. In fact, if we render this here, yeah, you'll see that's not good. That's not what we want. Sometimes with modeling, those accidents happen, and you'll want to select certain faces and flip them back and render, and everything's fine. Everything's still there. Oh my god, I love this song. Alright, what else is awesome in here? Could you possibly go over other ways of creating edge loops? Yes, that is a great question, actually. Oh, great request. Question. Demand. That's coming from the live chat, by the way, for anybody watching after. Some of my favorite ways to make edge loops, my main favorite is, now this might take a little bit to get your head around, but to select, like let's say I wanted to cut this thing in half. I wanted to get an edge loop that went around the center. I need an edge loop. Because we're going to make a really, let me do this here. We're going to make a really crummy hourglass. A cubic hourglass. So I need at least one cut in the center, so I can squish it in the middle. One way of doing it would be to, I was just thinking, why even use this? I'll use a real thing. Let's get rid of all this other stuff. Let's use the real thing. Alright. Editable pop. Oh. Number 2, go to edge mode. One thing I like to do, so I want to cut this in half, sort of. I want to create an edge loop right through the center. So what I like to do is select all the edges that I want the edge to go through, and just click this button here, connect, just once. Boom. And we get an edge right in the middle. It's awesome. And it's always dead center. You can select a rollout instead, and there's some other options in here, like increasing how many segments, which could be very helpful. Also, there's this pinch and contract kind of modifier, in case you didn't want them equidistant, because at 0 it's just going to spread them out. Let's say you wanted them closer together. There's also slide, which moves them up and down. But, yeah, I don't want that. I wouldn't mind having them closer together though. That would be kind of good to get that proper shape, right? Maybe not like this. Let's do that. And hit OK. Now another way I could have done that is Oh boy, there's so many. You can, again, edge mode. We're making edges. We want to create edges. Right click and go cut. And actually, even for this modifier, you don't even have to have any edges selected. You can just go right click and go to cut. What did I do? Did I copy this again? Nope. Okay, we're good. Edge mode, right click, cut, not attach, cut. And you'll get this cool little cut tool. If you highlight on an edge, you'll see the symbol change to an edge. If you highlight at a very precise vertex, it actually turns to a little plus. If you're out in the middle, it turns into this kind of crosshair, but you really don't want that. Why? Because you're actually going to create vertices in the middle of faces, kind of out in the middle of the mesh, and that's not sound. So I'm showing you this way because I don't recommend doing it this way, but this cut tool is very helpful. So we can select an edge with the cut tool, and we get this cool little guy, and we can select the next, and then the next, and the next. We can also just select one on the far side, and you can see how it cut an edge right through. Same with down here. From our perspective, it looks like a straight line, but it's a curved object, so it actually is a curved surface. It's actually really nice if you want to create some odd shadows or like some machinery, like gears and things like that, but cutting around at a strange angle and then extruding or not the faces. Now, when you want to get back around, you see it turns to a crosshair. There's a vertex there, edge loop's done completely. Now, of course, it's awful, but again, it could be exactly what you wanted. So we're going to undo this. Another way to do it is there's a tool, a very dangerous tool, helpful but dangerous, called Slice Plane. This guy right here. When you turn on Slice Plane, you get a plane, and you can see where it is actually getting highlighted. That's where the cut will be. The cut isn't there yet, though. It's not there yet. This is just reference. And then when you select Slice, the slice has been made. If you move the plane, you'll realize that's where the slice was made. You just shut off Slice Plane and you're done. Why I don't recommend Slice Plane? Well, it's not that I don't recommend it, it's just you have to be very, very careful with Slice Plane. Because if you have other objects in your scene, not in your scene, if you have other objects that make up this model, like this awesome booster pack right here, and I just turn on Slice Plane, first of all, not a whole lot. Oh, probably that one. Actually, no, we want edge mode. We're making edges. So, Slice Plane, it's actually affecting everything. Everything in the scene. Again, dangerous. Especially when you're trying to do cuts like this. And when you're trying to do angled cuts and you're really focused on where this is ending up, this is the most important part I'm focused on, and you don't realize that you're going to just destroy the mesh of your other models. It's really good to not go crazy with cutting. Keep your, they're called subdivisions and edges, keep those under control because they can get out of hand really fast. Really, really fast. The best practice is to keep it simple, and you can, as you go, add more along the way. That's usually the best practice for that. Now, the Slice Plane tool, like I said, it's
I still use it. It's just you gotta know how to use it. One of the things that helps keep it in check is like this. Actually, let's do element mode. So this model has 3 elements. Select the element we want to modify. We want to hit with the slice plane, then turn on slice plane. You'll see that it's actually only affecting the model we selected. It's not affecting the other ones at all. That is typically how I use slice plane, because I know exactly what it's affecting. And it doesn't have to be just the whole element. You can go into polygon mode and just select a couple and slice plane. And again, it's only going to affect the ones that you have selected. It doesn't affect others. That's a good way to keep it in control. Let's see. So we talked about in the edge mode using connect to make edges. By the way, I just clicked the connect button. I have 3 edges. The reason I have 3 when last time I had 1 is because of the rollout. Whatever you put in here last, that's what its default will stay as. So I'm just going to clear this back to the basics. There. So now when I click it, all better. So yeah, edge mode connect is a great thing to do. There is the cut modifier. Well, it's not a modifier, it's just the cut tool. This can be handy. There's slice plane, and there's one more, which is almost as dangerous as slice plane. It's called quick slice. Right here, quick slice. Pretty sure it's over here too. Yeah, quick slice right there. You can click once and you see how you get this vector, and everything is going to get cut along that. And you click another time and the cut's been made. Which means, as you can see, it's not straight. It's straight giving you perspective, which is another good reason, if you wanted to use it, to go into a different viewport. And then, if you want to eyeball it and you don't really care, then you can quick slice from here. Again, I still wouldn't do this because the edge isn't square. If that's what you want, more organic shapes, then that's perfect. Even though it's still a straight edge, it's not very organic. But slice plane, that's another reason slice plane's awesome, because you can really specifically manipulate this thing. This many degrees, this place, that place. Like, it's on point. It's really nice. Yeah, I think that about covers edge loops. Which, I mean, are key. You need you need them. Or else you don't have the geo to actually manipulate anything. Let's see. Alright. So, no target connect. Oh, one last thing. Constraints. Sound exactly as it should. Constraints. Those things are a lifesaver or the most aggravating thing in the world. Aggravating only because if you forget to shut them off. Don't forget to shut them off. Just like the slice plane modifier. So, let's say I have this vertex. Now, actually, let's do this. Just to make it a little off kilter and weird. I'm just going to rotate this shape so it doesn't really line up in any proper axis, right? So if I select this vertex, let's say that I wanted to bring it down this edge. So one thing I could do is try to manipulate it so it went down, but now it's moving over, so I gotta kind of eyeball it there. Now it's out too far. So, but now you see the problems that this has. It's not so good. What you can do instead is do a constraint, which are these radial buttons up here. So an edge constraint, if you select this, will constrain it to its nearest edge. So if I were going to the right, it would actually stick along this edge that was already there, left or right. If I went down, it would follow that edge perfectly. So handy. So handy. Face constrains to the face, of course. So again, the top of this, it's actually gonna, oh, check it out, it's Pac-Man. So it's actually gonna stay on that plane because that's the plane of the face. Normal is pretty much the same deal. Not much to worry about with normal. Usually it's edge or face. Now the problem is, if you have this left on, that's fine. You're going around, you're making other things. It won't carry onto the other object. But this object, let's say you went back and you're like, oh man, I'm going to shift this whole base over so it's askew. And then you, like, what the hell is this? That's not what you want at all. Actually, that kind of looks like a piston. That's sweet. It's because your edge is selected, your edge constraint. That's dangerous, man. Dangerous. So make sure that's turned off. Let's see. UWs, creating polys, planar. Alright, I think the last trick. Quote-unquote trick. Well, actually, let me go through the rest of these tools. Extrude. So this is edge mode. We're going to chamfer. Chamfer's an edge. Yeah. Polygon. Extrude, outline, inset, bevel, bridge. Yep. I think the last thing I'm going to do is show you a wonderful trick of, so that example we had earlier where we had a cylinder that sat upright. Let's get out of this one. Give me something. Alright, do something. Let's pick a better color. Let's do green. Yeah, minty green. Alright. That is a bummer. So we had these edges and we said, oh, we can just connect them. Boom, done. If, for some reason, you were in the need to cut these edges around like so, because who knows, could happen, could be a special reason for it. You have this and you're like, wow, this is all screwed up. Well, first of all, yes, it is all screwed up. Second, what you can do to fix it is you can highlight all of these edges, or all these vertices, or instead, it's the same as an edge one. We have an edge loop, so you can just double click it and it should select the loop. So it doesn't matter, you can be edge, you can be vert, whatever. You can go over here and there is a make planar button, which is not what I'm talking about, but there is X, Y, and Z. X makes them all line up on the x-axis, y on the y-axis, which is crazy. Or what we actually want to happen is the z-axis. Ta-da! Perfectly straight. Perfectly straight. Again, you can avoid this with connect modifier, but sometimes, you know, you might want it to happen that way. Let me just do this quick. Rotate. So what I did here is, all I did is I created an edge loop. I created that edge loop with the connect modifier. If we can connect. Then I select all these vertices and turn on my edge constraint. And then I rotated it, actually. And because they're constrained to the edges, they still stay there, which is pretty sweet. You can get some neat looking shapes. Whereas if that wasn't on, it would and that's not what I want. That's not what I want. So, alright, so let's just say, get rid of this. I mean, things like this, it just will happen once in a while, and maybe you don't want the whole thing. Maybe you just need a piece of it. Maybe this is intentional to have that spook in there. And then from this viewport, we're going to select those, we're going to make it cleaner. I'm going to try and get this more in line with the original. Just select all these, inset. Oh, that's not agreeing with me. Oh, that's right. Extrude. Group by liquid normal or by polygon. These are those drop downs. So as you can see, by group is the whole chunk. By the best direction it can assume. The next one is local normal, which is actually what I want. Last is by polygon. So local normal, I'm going to actually do something like this. What am I making? I'm ready. I'm imagining it being some sort of like power cell. Some sci-fi power cell. Take that, you can extrude this. Actually, not extrude. I want to bevel this. Just bring it up a little bit. Extrude it one more time. In many ways, the skin can't, right? Select this edge because it's a little hard. And chamfer it. So nice. Again, you can see how it's faceted. So I'm going to go into polygon mode, select everything, auto smooth. There we go. Awesome. And yeah, feel free to go crazy with this stuff. I mean, quite seriously, imagination is your limit. Because these programs are artistic tools. Even though they are built around a lot of programming, a lot of complicated programming. This is where it all starts. So, let's see what else we're going to do. Select this ring. So what I did here to do that is I selected a polygon, I hold shift and select the one next to it, and it selects the loop of that. I could have just rather done this. Same difference. So I'm going to select those guys. Let's do a little inset. I want to make some like rings around the bottom of this. Like it's meant to lock into something. So we're going to double click, edge mode, double click, control, double click. So now I got both of those selected. Going to chamfer, 1 inch loop. So what I'm doing right here is I'm making the, where I want the grooves to be. And inset. Now again, this has another, right now, not inset, extrude. Extrude! Again, there's by polygon, by the whole group, or the local normal, which means like the local direction the face is pointed. Yeah, this thing's looking pretty neat. Holy noise, baby. Monstercat, calm down. By the way, that's what's playing in the background is Monstercat's playlist. Oh yeah. Alright, cool. So you can see it's a lot of tinkering. A lot of just little tinkering, playing around. We haven't touched materials in this lesson. If people are interested, we'll do that on the next one. I know we covered a lot of stuff inside of this. A lot of stuff. But if you want to see more, please ask questions. Comment on the video, anything. This will be on YouTube very shortly. Under Thorgrim as well, which is my Twitch TV handle. I know my production value isn't the greatest, but with enough preparation, eventually I'll get there. I just wanted to get this out there for everyone to help learn. And again, feel free to ask me any questions and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If there's interest in doing more of these, again, let me know, and we'll make more shows. It can be as much as if you guys want to just do Q&A sessions. If you have specific questions about, of course, tutorials, we can do that. If there are requests to do a model, there was a time when I was taking Pokemon requests. And if someone wanted to submit some material or give me some reference for something to model, I can work at that. Pokemon are great because of how they're flat color and how, I don't know, amorphous they are, right? They're a lot of fun. And you don't have to get too caught up in materials. You don't have to do bump maps, dirt maps, and you're not going for realism. You're going for soft, vinyl, cartoony flat colors and stuff. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, that's it. I'm going to be heading out, and I hope to see you guys later. Take care.